Have you been tapping into your emotional IQ over the past 5 months? I know I have. I know Kashonna has. And I'm guessing that all of us are, whether we know it or not. I'm Linda Katz-Wilner, and I am the founder of Successfully Speaking. I'm a speech, language, and soft skills specialist. And I help you and your teams speak like leaders and polish your professional presence. Before I go into introducing our wonderful guest today, Kashonna, let me just give you a little idea of what the agenda is. This is action-packed. There's so much information to share, and not just between Kashonna and myself, but with all of you here, because we all have these experiences that we can talk about. We're going to be interviewing for the first half hour, but please post questions in the chat room. We will be looking at that and answering questions as we go along. But at 12:30, what we will do is go out into breakout rooms where we can discuss some topics that Kashonna and I have come up with that we think would be very helpful. So we will end, this is a little bit longer than the past ones. The breakout rooms will end at 12:45. Kashonna and I will remain until 12:55 to answer any questions you might have or discuss what came out of the breakout sessions. But it is a hard stop at 12:55. So I know many of you have 1 o'clock meetings. We'll give you that 5-minute breather in between. Emotions in the workplace and in our homes are at an all-time high. Given the current health, social, and economic status, and the climate, everything has changed tremendously. How can we manage to have healthy conversations that have the potential of being so emotionally charged? Well, I have been fortunate enough to know Kashonna Holland of SK Leading Forward. We've known each other from several years ago, and recently we started collaborating on a project for diversity and listening skills. Kashonna, and I'm going to let her introduce herself in a second, but Kashonna is an insightful and energetic corporate trainer. You're in for such a treat. And when we started working on this project about listening skills and diversity, we realized what a powerful topic this is. And I knew she would be absolutely a wonderful guest for this series. So I'd like to welcome you to Kashonna Holland. Welcome, Kashonna.
Thank you so much, Linda. It is indeed a privilege as well as an honor to be here and to share this space with so many amazing professionals. I am definitely delighted to be able to share today, and hopefully I can provide some insight to where we are in our society right now and how to have those healthy conversations.
All right, Kashonna, tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, first of all, I'm the president and CEO of Simply Kashonna, and Simply Kashonna is a lifestyle brand. So it really deals with people personally, one-on-one, doing personal coaching, and really from a speaker's standpoint, inspirational speaking, motivational speaking, and really helping people to get out of the rut, if you will, of life, helping them to advance spiritually, personally, as well as professionally. So out of that was birth SK Leading Forward, where I have an opportunity to go into companies, whether private or public, as well as federal agencies, and work with them on soft skills, a lot of what you do. So we kind of commingle there. But I'm really coming from a standpoint of changing cultures through engagement. What can we do to better engage people? How can we teach them to have a culture of empathy? And that's really what I have the privilege and honor of doing on a daily basis. And I've been doing that full time now for about 8 years. So I love what I do. At the crux of everything I do, it's about people. It's about building people and helping them to grow and develop.
That's wonderful. And that's where I knew you from years ago and knew you did some of this, but with everything that started changing in the past 5 months and maybe the past 3 months, emotions became even more, I don't want to say exaggerated, inflamed. And we have so many issues we're dealing with. And one of the things, and I heard you on another great interview with Kimberly Prescott talking about this. And so it's very much in alignment with what I wanted to ask you.
Yes.
And let's just talk a little bit about the diversity and inclusion. And I know that title has changed, right? So it's the DEI. And just if you can explain for a second, and then I want to poll everybody on what their experience is with that. So what does DEI stand for, Kashonna?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you know, of course, at some point, someone has heard the quote, diversity is inviting people to the table, and inclusion is allowing them to eat. And I think equity is pretty much giving everyone the same portion.
Mm-hmm.
So really helping them to understand, helping companies to understand how important it is to not just have it on your website, but move it into the culture of your organization. And Linda, I cannot wait to get these polls back to really see how many companies are engaged in this DEI effort. Because honestly, in the last 5 months, we've seen a lot of activity happening in our world. And I think that really some companies stepped up to the plate and said, we gotta do something about this. And then some moved back and said, let's not address it because maybe it'll go away. And I also think that there another level of that, or another component of that we've seen, is people have now grown a little weary in terms of dealing with some of these DEI issues or challenges in their organization. And so they're kind of, again, moving back and saying, okay, hopefully this will die off. Hopefully we won't have to deal with this. What that does is it puts people in a very reactive way of approaching things instead of a proactive way of approaching things. When we don't take time to address issues that are conflictual, what happens is it begins to be, it becomes a snowball, right? It starts small, but then it gets bigger. What happens there is people begin to protest in their own ways. I have seen this in organizations where people do silent protests, where they don't show up to work on time, or they go extra long for lunch, or, you know, they don't respond to emails. It's showing up in different ways. And we have to figure out, what do we need to do to address this in a positive and healthy way so that we can make sure that we have a functioning organization and a healthy organization.
So with that, Kashonna, let's take a look at we have 69% of the people responded. If anybody else wants to respond to this poll, do it in the next like 30 seconds, and then we'll show you what the results are, because I think I don't know, it probably doesn't surprise you, Kashonna, but let's just show you. I think we have 77%, 80%. Okay. So let's just show you I'll share the results. So 86% of the companies are actively engaged, which is wonderful, but 14% are not.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you, Kashonna?
That actually is a surprising number. I'm surprised to see so many people are engaged, and I cannot wait to hear how they are engaging their employees. 14% is low, but it's actually not surprising either. I was looking to see actually more on the no than the yeses, but I'm excited that we have engagement in such high numbers there. I would, again, I'm interested in knowing the no's or the yeses, what they're doing to engage their employees. So that's going to be good.
And actually, some people, you can certainly type those in or type questions about that as we're going along.
Yes.
And Marnie, if I miss any questions, I know you will ping me and let me know there's a question I need to bring up.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop sharing the results for a moment. And let me just close this window. Give me 1 second. Now, Kashonna, what do you think is could be the deterrent? And I think you alluded to it already, but the deterrent for organizations to proactively do this, which you think is the ideal way. If there's the potential to have negative impact, why are they not doing these programs?
Well, let's be honest, Linda. We really don't like conflict. Right. Now, conflict is something that is, a lot of people think that you have to resolve conflict. but I come from a different perspective. I think that all conflict is not necessarily meant to be resolved. There is some conflict that you must manage. And honestly, these issues that we are we are facing in our world today are some that we are going to have to really understand how to manage. I'm not sure if we'll ever get to a resolve per se.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at how conflict and how people handle or don't handle conflict, that's the biggest deterrent from dealing with some of the issues. We have to remember that we are a very diverse world.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is people come with different backgrounds, different experiences, different cultures, different races, different ages, different generations, and how they handle conflict is very different. And so you put all of that in one organization, it can definitely be very hard
Mm-hmm.
to manage all of this diversity. But so I really think, to answer your question, I really think that that's why some companies really don't engage with things that will escalate or have the tendency to escalate conflict.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that is certainly a problem. And I know even when I go to a lot of the HR conferences, there are always talks about not just diversity, but the cognitive bias
Oh,
that we all have. I mean, I just witnessed something yesterday by even watching the conventions where what people hear is not necessarily what I just heard. They're everything, people listen through I want to say their own lens, but it's their own ears. And they have different barriers that are preventing them from really hearing things. You and I talk about the listening part.
absolutely. And when you think about, again, my experience is very different from your experience. So if something triggers me, there is a very good chance that I can hold a wall can come up, and I definitely block everything that you have to say out.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that we definitely have to get to the root of as well. When we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about those triggers. And if I'm able to identify those triggers, then I'm able to address those triggers. Hopefully that would be that would be your decision, but we're able to engage a lot better.
But Kashonna, isn't the problem also is we don't even know what biases we have. It's so subliminal sometimes, right? So we may not be aware that we think that way. Do you find that?
I find that, yes, we may not be aware, but there is something in us that it comes through in very subtle ways sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I stress the importance of being self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
not just as a leader, just as an individual. Are you aware of who you are, how you communicate, how you lead, so that when those things come up, you're able to address them? It takes a level of self-awareness to be able to identify the biases,
Mm-hmm.
and then to be honest with yourself and say, yes, that is a bias that I'm dealing with.
And we might come back to that, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. And that is, how comfortable are all of you even engaging in affairs that involve or revolve around race, gender, wage gaps, etc.? So we have another poll for you, because that's the big question. Are you even comfortable with it? And I know we have a lot of HR professionals. Ideally, we like to think HR professionals are more comfortable with it, but maybe not. Maybe not for all the different topics. That might be an issue.
Well, can I say this as well? Sometimes HR professionals are wanting to make sure that they are in alignment with their company's values. This can be a challenge as well, because sometimes we're working for companies that actually go against our core values. And this can definitely end up being a huge challenge, because when you are misaligned, you will find yourself compromising in a lot of spaces or places in your life. So be very careful about your alignment. Be very careful about that. So when you talk about HR professionals, sometimes they believe they can believe one thing, but the company says another, which can be very hard. That can be challenging as well.
So you have that cognitive dissonance, and then how do you deal with that?
Absolutely.
Well, let's look at the poll, And welcome, Steve. If you can just close your camera and mute your mic, that would be helpful to us. And let's take a look at the comfort level. So it's interesting. Nobody says I'm very uncomfortable. So that's good news. Right, everybody, can you see it now, everybody, the results? Kashonna, can you see the results?
I can't see the results, no.
Okay, because I didn't press share.
There we are.
There we go. So nobody said that they're very uncomfortable. 21% are somewhat. I didn't know on this scale to really put a neutral, so we're going on both sides of the scale. 45% say they're somewhat comfortable, which is great news. And look, 34% are very comfortable. So we have a highly evolved audience who is comfortable with some of these discussions, which is great. That's great to hear.
That is great to hear, especially given the tension that we're experiencing. You know, a lot of times we are in companies that really don't want to talk about certain things, and race being one of them, right? It just makes people uncomfortable to talk about race. And what I ask people is, or what I suggest is that we do talk about it, but we have to understand how to talk about it. So it's not that it shouldn't be talked about. We just got to figure out how to talk about it. And I love the fact that the polls say I'm comfortable or I'm somewhat comfortable talking about it. My question then becomes, how are you engaging other people in it, and who are you talking to it to? Because or talking about it to. This is why I asked, because if I am comfortable talking to my peer, that's different, that looks like me. That's different from talking to my peer that does not look like me. So are you comfortable talking about it to someone who you know can agree with you, or are you comfortable talking about it to someone who does not look like you, who may not agree with you?
So there's the two different levels, absolutely. And I'm looking here, we have some good comments here. I know Jeanette, hi Jeanette, I didn't get to say hello to you before. It's time to face this discomfort if change is what we're after. So we have to step in and try to make those changes.
We have to.
And I know, let's see, Shay had said, Shay asked if there are any recommendations, and I don't know if you'll get to this later, but any recommendations on digital tools that can be used to assess the personal or professional biases, like the race, the gender, the cultural, and I think there are that I know of. Kashonna, do you know of any?
I'm trying to think of a specific tool for the bias. I'm excuse me for just trying to go in my memory memory right now. If I do though, Shay, I'll make sure that I put it in the chat if I think of something along
and I will have a follow-up email, but Shay, I know there is something through either Harvard University, some university up in New England has a website, and I think it's free, and you fill out they have different types of biases that you can assess, and I think it's free. So we will make sure, Marnie, remind me to put that in the follow-up letter for everybody.
Yeah, Kim said she's going to send some after the webinar. So thank you so much, Kim. We appreciate that.
Who is that, Kim? Did you say?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Phyllis was saying the people on this call are not a cross-section of the United States. We're the ones who are comfortable and want to learn more. Of course, that's a wonderful comment, Phyllis. Now, right, the people who sign up for something like this want to learn. The people who want to keep their heads in the sand aren't here. Maybe.
Absolutely. And you have to be willing. I think that it is important. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for the comment. It is important that we open up and have those kind of conversations. I'm a part of a Rotary Club in my county, and I am one of maybe 2 or 3 other Black people in that Rotary Club. And one of the things that they made a decision, or I didn't make a decision, my Rotary Club made the decision to read White Fragility. And so I showed up to engage in that conversation because it has to be more than a book read. It has to be an experience. It has to be engaging with someone who is actually having the experience that you have not had, and saying, how do we talk about this? What are we doing? What are we not doing? What do we need to do? And guys, I want to make sure that everyone understands that it is important to have the conversation with people who don't look like you. It is important. It's kind of like being a part of a board or a committee, and we're making decisions about people who, who are in, I'm going to say poverty. Okay. But none of us have been in poverty before.
Mhm.
So if we don't have that voice at the table, then how can we make the decisions? We got to talk about it. We got to talk about those things. It's very important.
Now, this makes me think of a question, and I know we've talked about this a little bit. I know somebody who all went to college, happens to be my son. All of his friends, most of them, were white privileged, and there was somebody there who was Black, and they were all wonderful friends. They played sports together. Everything was great. And when everything happened with George Floyd, my son said to me, everybody's calling him. Everybody's calling that one friend. And you can't do that. Like, learn some things yourself too. You can't call your Black friend to get all that information because that's overwhelming. And so what are your thoughts about that?
It can be overwhelming, but I'd almost rather you come to me
Okay.
than assume.
Mm-hmm.
I'd almost rather you ask me than not to.
Okay.
Because then it looks like we're dancing around it and we're not, it's kind of, again, that pink elephant or that that's in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, let's just put curtains on it.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just decorate it to make it look good, so that I can feel good. We have to engage in the conversations. We have to talk about it. And really, people don't want to talk about it also because there's a level of discomfort that's there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to feel uncomfortable. But guys, I want you to understand that discomfort is temporary. Discomfort is temporary. When we're working to get to the end goal of unity, we will go ahead and brace ourselves for the discomfort. And I would rather do that than not.
Mm-hmm. And even when we were talking a month or two ago, the simple question is, and I asked this of you, should I be saying African American, Black, people of color? Like, what's offensive? And that's true of every culture. There are words that could be offensive and others that are accepting. So I guess since I did pose that, people may say, well, what was Kashonna's answer? What was your answer to that?
My answer was, it depends on the person, and I would ask.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay with being called either, with being called Black or African American. It doesn't matter to me, but I would ask a person before you address them, what is their preference? There's nothing wrong with that.
Because not everybody considers themselves African American. They may be Caribbean. So
absolutely.
Now, we may not get to all our questions because we're getting some great, the ones that we anticipated, but Rakia, I think it's Rakia, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Rakia, but she said, when discussing matters of DEI and establishing an open forum, what is the difference between having a brave space or a safe space? And which is the best in your opinion? Great question.
The best, in my opinion, is a safe space. I want to know that if I come to you and I say something that you don't agree with, that I'll still be safe, that you won't look at me the wrong way, or you won't treat me differently because of that. I want to know that in that safe space, I can be vulnerable. I can be transparent, and I won't be judged. So a safe space is to me more important than a brave space. I think that when you have that safe space, then brave and being brave and courageous, it kind of undergirds that space.
Okay. So brave is more of, in a way, what I'm bringing to it. I'm brave enough to say it, but it might not be safe.
I also
safe is more important, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I may be brave and then I may be penalized for my courage.
Absolutely. Because a safe space indicates to me that people are ready.
Mm-hmm.
They're open and they're ready for the conversation. Brave just says, I just walk into the space and I'm just going to tell you whether you're ready or not.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's great. That was a great question and great answer.
Yes, Rakia, thank you.
Tom mentioned, Tom Costello said he referenced the 21-day racial equity habit building challenge by Debbie Irving as being a great resource. I'm not familiar with it. I'm not sure if you are, Kashonna, but any of these resources you're posting, we will send out in the follow-up letter. So everybody will have this. And feel free, if it gives you the option, to just copy the chat room, to save the chat room discussion.
Yes.
Jeanette is using the solo the solo IS to build my own bias self-awareness assessment. I'm
Wow.
not familiar with that.
I'm not either, Jeanette. Definitely make sure that we get that information if you don't mind, after this as well.
And maybe in the Q&A when we open it up later, Jeanette, you can mention
Yeah.
it to us. Jeanette will actually be a future guest on my series in November.
Oh, yay.
Okay, Kathy, who's also a future guest, she agrees with Phyllis. I also think folks could use help holding these discussions in the most effective way.
Yes.
Great lead-in, Kathy, because that's my next question
Mhm.
to Kashonna. What are some techniques that you recommend leaders use to discuss the topics that are difficult to discuss?
I love to say this, and people probably heard it when we did the videos, but respect the pause.
Mm-hmm.
Respect the pause. You have to understand that there are a number of emotions that arise when we are talking about things that are difficult. And I would really suggest that you stop and breathe. Allow yourself to really get in touch, if you will, with how you're feeling about a particular topic. So, number one, respect the pause. Number two, ask questions. Never assume
Mm-hmm.
that you know. When you do that, it can definitely cause a response that may be less favorable around the table. So ask questions. So we have respect the pause, we have ask questions, and the third one I'm going to say is respond with empathy. Respond with empathy. And empathy is very different from sympathy. I love to use this example. If I'm thinking about someone out on the water in a boat and I'm looking at them and I see them sinking, Linda, I say, oh my goodness. Sympathy says, I am so sorry
Mm-hmm.
that you're sinking. Empathy goes out to the boat and it helps them. It gets in the boat with them and either helps them to stop sinking or provides them a lifesaver to ensure their safety. So when we listen with empathy or when we respond with empathy, we make sure that we use statements such as, I understand what you're saying, or I understand how that can frustrate you. I understand how that can make you upset.
And that's a good point. I understand, but not necessarily I know how you feel, because we never, ever know how somebody feels. And I think we spoke about this also, Kashonna, when I talk a lot about listening skills. There's some very good resources that I have on the Zen of listening. And one of the things there is they talk about getting in that person's movie. If you can put yourself in their movie, they may be saying something that, and I spoke about this before, that may be totally ridiculous. But if you think, that's Kashonna's experience. That's what she's saying. I may not agree with it. I don't even think it's right, but I understand that's your movie and I can respect that. And if you start to do that, that's the empathy, right?
Yes.
Like that you're getting in you're walking in their shoes, even though you don't know how to walk in their shoes, you're trying to. And that helps you be a better listener.
Absolutely. I always tell people to stop saying that's common sense, because that may not be common sense to the person that you're talking to.
And that
Your
alienates
experience
them.
is very different.
And that may alienate them as well.
Absolutely.
So are there, and again, there's so much, and I want to get to the breakout rooms because there's so many people who have great points. I will also mention that Colette said that facing the uncomfortable conversations call for people to dig deep and to be courageous, and it's not easy. So there's the brave and courageous, but we're not saying just make it a brave space. But it does take courage, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It takes a huge level of courage because, again, we don't want to experience that discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. It really is challenging to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, because you don't want other people to see you a certain way. That's why we talked about that safe space.
Mm-hmm.
How it's so important. But it does take a level of courage, and it takes a level of boldness, not just as one race, but as the other race.
Mm-hmm.
you know, whatever difficulties or whatever diversity you're dealing with in your particular company or organization, let's just say it's Black, white, for example, it takes a level of courage and boldness from me, and just as much as it does for my white counterpart to address it.
To listen and to be open to what you may not like about what I'm saying or doing.
Yes,
And
yes.
those are tough conversations. I'm looking at the time and it's 12:33 and I want to do the breakout rooms. Is there anything else, Kashonna, you want? I know there's so much to talk about, and if you haven't seen our lead up video clips, and maybe we'll send them out in the email because we touch on some different topics. Is there anything else that you want to mention, the tools, or should we just go into basically, we wanted to talk about what are some tools or techniques that your organizations have been implementing over the past 5 months?
Yes,
Do you want
absolutely.
to just go to that?
Let's go to breakout, because I'm reading the comments, so I'm kind of trying to keep up with the chat as well. But let's go into the breakout sessions, and then we can take a peek in.
Raquel, why don't you unmute your mic and just let us know what you have been doing?
All right, I work for Howard Hughes Medical Institute, which is located in Chevy Chase, Maryland, near NIH. So we conduct biomedical research. Once the George Floyd issue hit nationwide, my president was swift and made a call to action for our organization to change our policies and procedures and the way we dealt with people. Sorry, you hear a kid in the background. In DEI, we have a SharePoint site with resources and books. We have our leadership team and everyone to read on books that tells to being an anti-racist or dealing with racism. We also have leadership training for unconscious biases. So we brought in Cook Ross to train them and have them change their viewpoints and see how they're managing their subordinates. We have affinity groups set up. We established a DEI committee. In addition to that, we brought in an outside facilitator to talk to Black employees just to see how we felt so we could have a room for ourselves, because when you're amongst certain people, you feel more comfortable and brave in other spaces that you normally wouldn't be brave in. So they gave us the time to speak and say how we felt. The information that we provided to him was confidential. And then if we just chose it to share with the president, then he will send it back to her. And our president also had small groups of 6 employees, and she had many sessions throughout the month, so we can all talk about DEI and see what she can do for the organization to have us strive and go forth and get us out of this.
And Kashonna, you're muted. You're muted. I know you said it's amazing.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna. Rakia, that is amazing. Yeah. That level of engagement is amazing. Just because it's kind of like you see it for both sides. You invite someone in who looks like the employees so that they can talk freely and engage freely. And then on the other side, you have all of these resources, and your president, I think you said, coming in to listen, not to pass judgment, not to say how you should feel, but to listen. That's huge. That's huge. That's an excellent company. That's good stuff.
And Raquel, I'm not sure if you mentioned it. I'm trying to read the chat room and see where people are right now. But you also said it wasn't just the groups of the Black employees, but you broke it up in several different levels. Did you mention that this time?
Yes, she met with the scientists to understand how we're conducting our labs, creating a pipeline for different investigators of color, because scientists are predominantly white male, just to see how we can create a new diverse pipeline for new and upcoming scientists, reaching out to different communities, and then administration staff. And then she broke between white, Black, and other races as well. And then she mixed the group up so she can get an all-around holistic view of how everyone's feeling.
Sounds like a gold standard. Right?
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I know there are only 6 of us with the cameras, but I know there are more people. Feel free to open up your cameras so we can see you if you want. Did anybody else have other, and I think I lost Kashonna. There you are. I found you. You just moved. You jumped to a different Hollywood square. Did anybody else have any takeaways from the group?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Anybody, if you want to open your mic. Okay.
Tom, are you there? Because I had a Tom in my group, and he's with Travelers, and
Tom Costello. Is he still here? I'm not sure if he's still in the
Gone.
session. I don't see him here. Kashonna, do you
Uh,
remember what he was?
Travelers did, well, one specific thing that I love that they did was they did listening circles, where they actually took time to listen to employees, the concerns and the heaviness, if you will, of the employees. And from there, they established other resources and, you know, such as videos and readings and things like that. So they're moving in a direction that is, sometimes people can say it's too quickly, but I think that they're moving at a great pace and really engaging the employees and keeping that engagement through other trainings and things like that. So I wanted Tom to be able, because he definitely can say it a lot better than I can, but I wanted to acknowledge that Travelers is doing an amazing job at engaging their employees on this.
And Tom is also the person who had a resource. He gave us a resource. So we will send that out to everybody. I'm just looking if there are any other comments, because Lenita had said that my African American employee resource group is reading How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. I'm not familiar with that. But we have homework to do and to send out all these resources. We have some great resources here. Jeanette had said it's okay to do your own work rather than to go to those who have been victimized by racism and discrimination to ask them how others should not mistreat them. There's a lot of information out there, and it's part of self-discovery. So, and I did pronounce your name correctly, Rakia. I just saw your text. I said that correctly, Rakia?
You did.
Okay. Okay, so very good information. We're coming up to, it's 12:54 now, at least Eastern time. There's so much information. Kashonna, I cannot thank you enough. This has been such an active discussion. You have such jewels of wisdom, gems of wisdom, whatever we want to call them. It's just the beginning of our learning more, and we will share this with you. Kashonna and I do this type of training. We were talking in our group that sometimes it's even better when an outside person comes into your organization.
It's definitely better. Yes.
You don't want to listen to what your mother's telling you to do, but you'll listen to what your friends of the family tells you. And they told us that with the organization that wanted us to come in there, that they're not going to listen to HR in the same way. They've already had that training, but yet sometimes they need facilitators. Like I think, Rakia, you mentioned the facilitator came in also. So those are things to think about. Please stay in touch with us. We have other events coming up. The next, and I'm going to quickly just mention for the next event. Let me quickly go here. We have in September, and I know she was on the call, Kathy Lindstrom is going to be talking about the expanding role of the HR business partner. It's not just what it used to be. And then in October, we have Jim Reese from Offit Kerman, and he'll be talking about business development. Not only, he does a lot of business development out of his organization between other companies, but I think we need to know about how we can network and what we can do within our organizations. If you've attended here today, we have you on our mailing list. We will send you updated information. We'll compile the resources that came up from today's chat and send them out to you with a link to the video. And we'll let you be aware of when our next webinar is. And I thank all of you for coming today from all over the country. And I know some from Asia were here today as well, but they may have gone to bed by now because it is late. It's probably almost midnight there. So I thank everybody. This was a wonderful webinar. Everybody be safe, stay healthy. Reach out to Kashonna, reach out to me. You'll have our contact information in the follow-up email, and let us know if you have any other questions, any other resources. I thank all of you for being here today.
Thank you all.
Okay, bye everybody. Have a great afternoon.